In the summer of 2022, I was desperate and frustrated. I had quit my job a few months prior in the pursuit of my own startup, and my business wasn't exactly thriving. After 6 years of IVF treatment, my wife had blessed me with a daughter early that year, and while I was elated to be a father, the stress of being a dad, the financial pressures from the clinic, and the weight of being the sole provider for my family had taken a significant toll in the recent months. As summer approached, I decided I needed a weekend away to clear my head and get back into the grind. I decided to take a 2-night trip, just me and our dogs, to a lake off an old logging road about 3 hours from home. It was one of my favorite spots, and I knew the woods there quite well. I packed my things, leashed the dogs, and set out early one Tuesday morning. When I got to the trailhead, the parking lot was empty. Middle of the week, I was stoked to be alone. There was a single deer path up a canyon, about 1,200 feet over 5 miles to get to the lake, and neither myself nor the dogs met anyone else on the trail the entire way up the mountain. I got to the lake around midday, spent the afternoon fishing and collecting wood and water for the coming night. The lake was pristine and quiet. Not a soul in sight. I was truly alone, aside from the dogs. I found a flat spot on the east side of the lake where the vegetation cleared, and I could set up a tent, and I made a small camp about 30 yards from the trail. I would have preferred to go further up the mountain, but it was still early in the season, and when I got to my campsite, the rest of the trail was too snow-packed to continue any further. As it was, I had to navigate over several hard-packed embankments before I got to a suitable area. The icy slush was difficult to navigate, even for the dogs, and when we had finally crushed our way over and through a few hundred yards, I made the decision we would be going no further. I set up my tent, hung my pack on a limb, and took my fishing pole back the direction I had come. I spent the evening catching and cooking fish at the edge of the spillway, and as the sun began to set, the dogs and I made our way back to the tent. Slipping over wet stumps and clumsily pushing through the snow, I stumbled into camp, exhausted and ready for a fire. As I approached the site, though, I realized some things were out of place. My pack, which had been hung on a limb, was sitting neatly on the other side of the clearing, about 20 feet from where I had left it. Sitting on top of it was a large eagle feather. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The dogs began a low growl, but as they circled the site, there was no one there. As I approached my tent, a stick had been used to carve an inscription into the dirt outside the entrance. It was 2 U's, one upside down connected to the other by a thin line, and then further connected by another line to a larger U shape. I would describe it as Native American petroglyphs in the shape of a bird or an eagle. Uniform, symmetrical, and above all things, fresh. Someone had been here. Someone neither I nor 2 very distrusting dogs had seen, heard, or smelled. Someone who had left no footprints through the snow and mud. Someone who had not passed us on the trail, or whose car had been parked at the trailhead. My stomach dropped. I felt a presence of being watched, but I couldn't tell from where. I quickly built a huge campfire and with dread watched as the last of the sunlight sank beyond the ridge. That night was a fever dream. Pulling the dogs into the tent with me, I clung to my knife and flashlight, praying that whatever was watching me would leave. It didn't. Throughout the night, I was periodically awakened to a variety of sounds. Yells, shrieks, the snapping of branches. The dogs would sit up, growl and bark until I would open the screen of the tent and shine my light into the forest. At one point, I had just drifted off to sleep when the dog's low growl woke me up. Thinking I might have the drop on whatever this was, I slowly unzipped the tent and leaned out with my flashlight. Taking a breath, I clicked it on. Standing just 3 feet from me was a doe and her calf. I scanned across her. An entire herd was in the sight. As my dogs lost it, the deer spooked and sprinted back into the forest, a crushing and trampling noise as several dozen deer evacuated the area. As it faded, I heard laughter, the deep laughter of a man turned to crying as it escalated, then sobbing, and then to deep growling, much more boisterous than anything my dogs could make, or even a bear would produce. I held the dogs tightly. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun peeked into the valley, I packed my things and left. This happened to me and my girlfriend I was dating back in the summer of 2014. This all took place in South Carolina. My girlfriend and I wanted to take a camping trip. We initially tried to go to a place 45 miles from our hometown, but they were going to charge us double what we thought we were going to pay for. We decided to head back, and it just occurred to me there's a spot in very close to where we live. Now, I will say it's more boondocking and off-grid. We didn't have to pay for anything, just parked the car and we got out. This place is quite gorgeous. There's a historic bridge and trail, also some of the oldest railroad tracks in the South. We got there before sunset, so we had plenty of time to pitch the tent and set everything up. There were a few cars when we arrived, but they were most likely hikers and would be gone by nightfall. The only thing that made us uncomfortable was a busted up and rusted old white van with no license plate. We both pointed that out, thinking it was weird, but we shrugged it off and started walking to a good place to set camp up. After several hours, around 3 a.m., following some quality time spent with her and taking in all the nature, and then going to sleep, we started to hear this obscure singing and walking around our tent. Anytime you hear commotion that early in the morning, nothing good can happen out of it. I peered my head out the tent to see what was going on. I didn't see anything or anyone, but nonetheless I didn't want to stay in that area when we both were freaked out. Just because I couldn't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I barely did a decent walk around our tent. As we were quietly gathering our belongings, we swore we heard the singing get louder. I recall words in this song he was singing had, "Now won't you all come out?" followed by this raspy laughing. Once we finally packed the tent, that was when crunching on the leaves and his humming is what we heard, so we knew this guy was close by. We booked it. I grabbed her hand and threw the tent and folding chairs on my back. We made sure to run the opposite way from where all his noise was coming from. Luckily, we set camp up fairly close to the parking lot because I could see lights through the trees. As we ran and scurried away from whoever was chasing us, we noticed the lights from the parking lot wasn't just the street lights, but also, to our horror, it was that old rusty white van we saw at the beginning. We hurried uphill just hoping this guy was alone. If he had an accomplice, that would be another person to deal with. As we reached the lot, we got into the bright streetlights. I noticed my girlfriend's hand make a slight twitch, and her pace slowed down. From that, I could tell she was turning her head to take a look at our attacker. I heard her gasp loudly. "Come on, don't look, we're almost there." She focused back and we continued running in unison. This guy was getting closer as I can hear the noise of the gravel intensify. I heard his wheezing and him barking, "Don't you all think you'll get away?" As we just made it past the van, we split, and I handed her the keys so she could unlock and start the car, and I can throw all the gear in the trunk, and we can make it out of this place. As I frantically laid the camping gear in the back seat and head to the driver's side, that was when my body faced forward for the first time in a while. Every noise this guy was making was close and amplified now. With the car running, I kept my head down to put it in reverse, but curiosity got the better of me. In the brightness of my headlights, this man was a behemoth with a stern, wrinkled face with red, patchy hair, a goatee that had dirt and crud smeared over it. His eyes were fixated on us like a scope magnifying on two 10-point bucks. He was wanting to kill. "Get back here," he barked, waving a baseball bat back and forth. I shook my head, with our hearts racing. In the rearview mirror, we saw the man slam the bat in frustration. A narrow escape. We drove to Waffle House and spent the rest of the early morning until the sunrise.